All right, ready to go.
Okay, we'll call the June 16th, 2025 Connected City Advisory Board meeting. Quorum?
Order.
Order. And then the first thing on the agenda, I'm sorry, is to review and accept the meeting minutes from last month. Does anybody have any comments on this minutes?
No.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
No nays. First by Commissioner or and member Kuzniak, second. No, oh my God.
Mahler.
Yeah, thank
That
you.
big long name.
Yeah. Okay. It's been a day. We'll move on to public comment. There's no one in the room. Anyone online?
Nope. It's just us.
Okay, hearing none, let's go to agenda item number 1. We'll hear the 2026, 2020 or 2030 capital improvement plan.
Yes, so good evening, Melinda Harger, Assistant Director, MSO. I was just going to pull up the agenda item with the commission.
wanna do the share
for
that?
tomorrow night.
You want to do the share?
Yes. So on the agenda for tomorrow's city commission on June 17th,
And you can move that down over to the. There you go. That'll be better for.
we have the 2026-2030 proposed capital improvement plan. So we're going to give an overview of the CIP as it's proposed right now and highlight some of the connected city projects. And then answer any questions, kind of go through what's in the agenda here. So first, just a recap of what is the CIP and what kind of projects you'll see on the CIP. It is our long-term planning tool. We do a 5-year CIP that we update each year. To be a CIP project, the project must cost 100,000 or more. Sometimes you'll see amounts that are less than that. That's either because the project has already started and maybe it's in its final year, or it has budget funding split across multiple funds. So overall, though, the project has to cost 100,000 or more and result in the creation of a new asset or extending the useful life of an existing asset. So there is a link here in the agenda item in the slides for the CIP guide and a video on that. Yes.
Could you clarify? I feel like the terminology between enhance or extend is kind of nuanced. So enhance to me says like you had a 4-inch sewer main and that was fine, but now you need an 8-inch. Like that's almost a different asset. It's the same right away, but it's different. Whereas if you were just replacing it in kind, that would be kind of extending the life of it, it seems.
Both of those would be able to be capital improvement.
Okay.
Where if you were just going in and fixing a small section of it as a repair, that's
just like a CIP.
that's O&M,
Right.
operation and maintenance.
So I think and we can hold off until we get to the line items if that makes more sense, but street maintenance seems to me like that would be, I mean, by its very name, a maintenance thing, not a capital improvement thing, because the streets are already there and they're not really being changed fundamentally.
of street maintenance in here though.
Yes. So anything that is debt funded is also listed here. So the street maintenance program
Okay.
has a portion that is debt funded as well as our water line replacement program.
Okay.
But in both of those, there is a portion that can be capitalized
Mhm.
and it extends the useful life either with water line, replacing a certain length of water line can be capitalized by the finance standards, and same with street maintenance. If you're just doing a standard mill and overlay, no, but if we are doing some major reconstruction in certain areas, or if we're putting in new sidewalk adjacent to a street maintenance project, some of those pieces can be capitalized.
Okay. So like the $4 to $5 million a year in the capital improvement plan, then is it safe to say that those are all then not just maintaining a mill and overlay, but there's something different about them that kind of changes the asset to enhance it, like. For example, I see that stuff like 14th to 23rd of Massachusetts Street is definitely its own thing, like that's not just street maintenance, because there's clearly a change.
Right, or like the Ninth Street.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But with something like just, I don't know if Sixth Street originally was just billed as like a replacement project, which is why MMTC was not involved with that, but with something like that, even though it's big, it's still kind of the same as it was before, or at least that was the original plan. I'm just trying to see where the line would be drawn and if it's possible to see that breakdown. I don't know, the feeling it's not so
Well, the
simple.
cost is also,
It's
yeah, it's
cost.
a yes and. so,
Yeah, and the Sixth Street, street maintenance from Iowa to Mass was a capital project. It had portions of it that were categorized by finance as repairs and maintenance, like just
Interesting.
fill and overlay.
Okay.
But it did have areas where there was new
Right.
sidewalk placed. We put in almost $3 million of new storm sewer
Mhm.
in an area where we had some issues as the project was going through design. And so
I don't think that was a great example, because I don't think anybody could argue against that, obviously being a capital improvement project is really different.
Yeah.
From how it went in. I'm just, trying to think of like some smaller ones where I think Steve Lashley has come to us and kind of explained. Like what's on the docket for the coming year, and often it's just like, we're just really overlaying them. Those kind of projects, do they appear in that line item?
they do because we have it as a contracted street maintenance program and it
Okay.
has split funding between gas tax, capital infrastructure, sales tax, and then geodebt. And because it has that split funding and what we choose to debt fund is those projects that, or those areas and locations that we're extending the useful life. We wouldn't want to bond just a maintenance.
Okay.
It's not typically the best practice, but if we're extending the useful life of the street for 15 to 20 years, bonding it for 10 years, you know, that makes sense. You don't want to bond something for longer than the useful life of the assets, so.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get a clear picture. I guess I didn't realize that there was kind of split funding oftentimes for the streets. It makes sense.
There's so much of this that gets split up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we have that money for contracted street maintenance program each year.
Mm.
And then we break that up into various contracts kind of for the type of work that's gonna happen. And a portion of some of those is capitalized and some of those projects don't have any capitalization under the program itself. But we didn't want to only show part of the program. We want to show the whole program in the CIP. So
Okay.
that was the thought process on there.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Sorry for kind of derailing stuff.
No.
Get that covered.
All right, so here is our schedule for the CIP process, just to let you know all the work that has happened to date. So in January, February, city departments, as well as the public submitted CIP project requests. And then in March, it went through a review process, approval, and then peer review. So it went through and the scoring, we have CIP prioritization guidelines. There were scores assigned by the person submitting the project, and then that went through peer review to determine if the scores that were assigned by the person submitting it, if those aligned with all of the guidelines that we have. Then in April, the financing plan was developed. In May, the draft CIP was taken to the CIP committee as well as to the executive team. And then tomorrow night is when the recommended CIP will be presented to the city commission. And then through this whole process, there's also the operating budget happening concurrently, and all of that is adopted in the second or third meeting in September typically. So here it's September 16th will be the operating budget adoption for 2026, as well as the 5-year CIP. So just a little bit on the scoring process. We do have a matrix. There is a link here to the prioritization guidelines. Basically, there are scores assigned to, you can earn up to 3 points in each of the commitment areas. So your project so it has some environmental sustainability ties to the KPIs. You'll get 1, 2, or 3 points for that particular one. Asset management can have up to 6 points. External funding is also up to 6 points, and that really is dependent on what percentage of your project is funded with grants or other outside funding outside the city. Regulatory compliance, this one is scored out of 3 points and then multiplied by 3. So it basically has a weighted factor. Same with strategic plan alignment. You can get 3 points and then it's multiplied by 2. So this is kind of an overall, this is where we capture more of outcomes, where this is the commitments up here. So applicants again score their project according to the guidelines, and then projects are peer reviewed. And sometimes those scores are adjusted and dialogue back and forth on why, what the justification was for that. And then it all goes to the CIP committee for final recommendations.
This is an internal committee, just to
Mhm.
help you understand, which is multi-departmental.
Who's doing the peer review?
The peer review for the commitments are primarily handled by those commitment champions. On
Directors
Mhm.
over those areas.
Asset management handled by asset management staff within that division of MSO. External funding is handled within the budget team, so they look at that. Regulatory compliance either goes to Evan, Trevor, or myself, kind of depending on what regulatory we're looking at. If it's ADA, we're sending it to Evan as our ADA administrator. If we're talking water, wastewater environment, we're sending that over to Trevor. And then strategic plan alignment, we have a couple individuals. Two of them are in PDS. So they're part of the CIP committee, so they were assigned to be peer reviewers on that, so. That's who does the peer review. And then here's just a visual showing kind of how that score comes together. And the number of points allocated to each. So you can see the heavier emphasis on asset management, external funding, and then if we go up strategic plan alignment and regulatory compliance, they have a higher weight. You can't see that here, but those do have. So there has been a big push in the last few years to reinvest in the infrastructure, catch up on some of the deferred maintenance. So a big infrastructure push. So these are some of the major projects completed within the last 2 years. So it includes 23rd Street, Wakarusa, on the west side of town, 6th Street, Iowa to Mass, as we previously were talking about, 19th Street, Harper to O'Connell, Queens Road. This was a street maintenance project on North 2nd. So that's highlighted here, North 2nd, 3rd. The Lawrence Loop from 8th to 7th, there by the Santa Fe Station. Central Station, the facility we're in now, was completed in the last 2 years. The Water Spray Park in Lions Park. And then a few other projects here I mentioned, Vermont Street. There was a couple blocks of Vermont, which it started out as a street maintenance and minor sidewalk, and we ended up reconstructing a block of that. And there was a water line as well associated with that. And then Stratford Water Tower Replacement. This was the big storm project, 17th in Alabama, that spanned a couple years for completion. We had terminal improvements out at the airport, and then our Caw and Clinton water treatment plant improvements that spanned a few years as well. So I won't go into some of this because it is based on assumptions that finance made. So here I'll start skipping around a little bit.
I'm happy to
Oh, sure.
edge on those. So
Mhm.
when they're looking at how much debt they can issue or cash flow, they have to have certain assumptions that they're making for the out years. Obviously the sales tax are, their conservative number is a 2% growth. We've struggled to hit 3. So, our sales tax is not, it's not something we rely on for growth in the ability to pay for things over time. And the mill levy, they're looking at 4%. We had seen quite a bit higher during the kind of the COVID years, but valuation growth is expected to kind of flatten out, which is good for all of us who own homes, if we own a home. And if we don't, well, it's still good because it means the cost of rents won't rise as fast. So that's what they're doing there. And then, of course, they work with us and also just markets on where we see cost of goods. I think the big thing here that's not mentioned on expenditures is we're guessing on any impacts that tariffs may or may not have.
Right, yeah.
Because we don't know. Okay. So there's some factor in here based on what we knew at the time, but it's probably not gonna, it will either cover it or not cover it depending on what it is. We just don't know.
So on revenue bonds, so this is our water wastewater fund debt. These are debt funded projects that are water wastewater related. I'll zoom in a little here. Majority of these projects and how we had them laid out did not really change. This is based on how we think the dollars will get spent. So we did update based on current cash flow for projects under construction, for example.
And the revenue bonds are different than general obligation bonds. The revenue bonds are backed by the rates. So when you pay your water wastewater bill, or for that matter, solid waste bill, those are things that we can go against revenue bonds, but it's also the size and scope of the utility, whether or not it qualifies to have a revenue bond. Okay, so just to kind of help you understand. So water, wastewater, we do revenue bonds with solid waste. Not quite there. We're close, but
in stormwater, we
No, not even
geo debt
close.
on that as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
it's a
was.
smaller utility.
right, we'll enter into government or general obligation bonds, which are backed by the good faith and credit of the government. That's where the government's coming out. And that simply means that they're backed by US treasuries. So there you go.
I saw a line item, I think it was for like the final year of constructing the new MSO facility where it did mention solid waste something. Is that
True.
is that like forecasting that there will be the ability to issue revenue bonds on solid waste? I wasn't sure if I understood what you're.
No, it's money that will be coming from that fund. But it would be geo debt or cash.
Yeah, it's geo debt for the solid waste portion of MSO Campus Phase 2.
I see. Okay, so that's the portion it's allocated to, not where it's coming from. Okay, I
Yes.
was confused.
Yep. And if you're gonna find something that would be a revenue bond, it's only gonna be sitting in here.
Mhm.
We'll be very clear about that, because again, solid waste doesn't, it's some income ratio to expenses and coverage that you have to have in order to be able to even issue revenue bonds.
And revenue bonds are, I'm trying to wrap my head around this in kind of a simplistic way of thinking about it. Is it almost like a self loan? It's like, you're gonna be getting this revenue from your utility rates in the future, so you can take out debt. I guess that is sort of mortgage to your future rates that you're collecting.
You're not taking money off the table that you have on hand. It's that you're guaranteeing your repayment based on your ability to generate revenue.
Okay,
Okay.
repayment to
Okay.
yourself essentially, or?
Well, to the loan,
Yeah.
not to ourselves, to the loan,
Yeah.
which is the loan holder.
Okay, who are typically loan holders? I'm just,
It's all over the place. So we'll go out into the
Okay.
market. We have bond counsel, and we also have financial advisors that go out and place our packages out for debt issuance, and based on the strength of our financials across the board and based on the kind of where the market is at the time, the rates will come when we get a call, and we'll go with the most competitive, and
Okay.
we just hope that there's a good day when we can go to sell.
Yeah.
And we get lucky occasionally, and some days we're.
Yeah.
So.
We sell revenue bonds in the fall and we sell general obligation debt in the spring, usually in March, April.
when you say you sell, is that like you close on a loan essentially? And like,
We put the loan out for people to bid on.
Mhm.
So in theory, the government, federal, state, local, has always been a fairly stable rate of return, right? So these people are given a certain guarantee on their rate of return when they invest in these. It's not gonna be as high. It's just like when you go to your portfolio with your financial advisors, and being that you play in that space, they will tell you, like, okay, we're gonna have a certain amount in a conservative growth, and we are generally always, that portfolio is municipal, state, and federal debt. So.
Okay.
Okay.
that makes sense.
So one change within the revenue bonds, well, a couple, I guess there were two changes. One, we went through and we did have more accurate estimates on our water tower repairs, coatings, some of those improvements to the tower. So we were able to make those adjustments. A little bit of that shows up here. Most of that shows up in cash. Again, if it's a small amount of a repair, it'd be better to cash fund that than to bond that. The other thing that we did have in revenue bonds previously, but we wanted to be cognizant of the fact that we had previously been in double-digit utility rate increases, and we were wanting to get to single-digit utility rate increases. We did pull back the funded projects that included the Southeast Conveyance Corridor. So that is our collection system, sanitary sewer, and we pulled back from the funded, we moved it to unfunded, the west of K10 water pressure zone. We actually found out we don't need a water pressure zone as soon as we thought. We will need water storage, however. So we updated the project to be a water storage project. And we've pushed that out a couple years, as well as moved it to the unfunded for right now. It is like many others on our unfunded list, which we don't show here, but it's in further on, down in the document with the unfunded list. With, I just lost my train of thought for a second, but on those projects like that with, it's west of K10, several of those are driven by our capacity. And so the development and where development's happening is going to drive the need for those improvements. So moving it out, but we're going to be keeping an eye on where development's at. So that we are timing those appropriately. We don't want to build it way ahead of when it's needed. But we have,
So much lower. On that section, K10 Westlake expansion utility.
oh, this
That's
one
the
right
you're talking
here.
about, right? Or are you not?
No, I was referring to, and when we get to the unfunded list, I can show it. It was west of K10 water pressure zone.
Okay.
And now it's,
West, I thought
yes,
that's right.
and now it's west of K10 water storage. These would
Yes.
be
There's a bit of a difference.
the utility relocations of water and sewer
Oh, okay.
under K10 as they are doing the improvement project right now, the South Lawrence Traffic Way, Westlake.
Make more sense. Okay.
So that project's actually under construction right now, and this is the portion that we will pay out next year. It's already under contract.
Okay.
Amount, but this.
And just to
6
explain that one really quickly, because as a taxpayer, these are
Mhm.
things that you look at and go, oh, why am I paying for this? Well, this is part of the system.
Mhm.
It's not to serve individual development or individual properties. So we have to we go back and look at our structures that we have and some of the policies that the governing bodies set. And this is something that would qualify as a general benefit. It's a little hard. We
Mhm.
choke on that a bit. But at the end of the day, that was where the governing body decided it wanted to land on this. We gave them the dollars, gave them the options, and basically they had to decide to add this in. This was 3 years ago.
3 million of it is for new extensions.
Yeah.
And that the commission had to give us direction
Yep.
to go ahead and do those new extensions across. The bigger portion, 2/3 of this project is actually,
Benefit district, yeah.
yeah, well, it's
Or existing.
existing and we had to move out of the way. And since it's in KDOT right of way, that expense is on the city.
Mm.
We have an existing water line there. And in some cases, we look at it and we say, well, if we're going to move it, maybe it shouldn't be a 12, maybe it should be a 16 or whatever. But
So there was a lot that went into that particular on Melinda's team side, trying to get their hands around, what does this look like? And who's gonna pay for it? How is it gonna pay for it? What do we bring forward to the governing body? So,
Mhm.
and that ship got sailed
yes.
3 years ago.
Yes. So other, Melissa mentioned benefit district as we get further along in the unfunded list for general obligation debt. You will see a new category that's unfunded benefit district. Those are specifically identifying that we know there's developments proposed in certain areas. And so we're outlining those now so the commission's aware in the next 5 years, it's likely there will be these benefit districts. And for instance, if we do Bob Billings extended, which we call the portion of Bob Billings west of K10. If we do that portion, then if we're looking at our complete streets and we want to go with a shared use path or bike lanes, there's a portion that the city pays for some of those enhancements. And then a big portion, the majority of the portion of the project is developer paid. So those properties, a benefit district would be formed. They would pay for, like on Queens Road, they paid a significant portion of Queens Road and the city paid for specific enhancements like the bike lanes. So there is a new area where we divide.
And those are not without controversy. And they also are part of economic development negotiations, which the city manager and his staff will work on along with our finance and
Right.
Linda's team as well. So just know those are complex and complicated things that we will at some point probably get sucked into, but we just don't know when. So we have them out there.
Right, and we just wanted to be more transparent in the list, in the unfunded list of which ones we see as being those benefit district items. So I will move on and we can always come back to these specific projects if you have questions about them. So on camera,
Amber really likes a lot of these projects.
yes, this is a lot of his area. So our capital infrastructure sales tax fund, here there's a couple different options. What is proposed by the CIP committee is this arrangement here. You can see that.
Might be able to slide that portion of the
I couldn't
window.
get this to
It
move.
would not move. Okay, that's a,
Not in this view.
that's a Zoom problem. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
I had not created this PowerPoint, but if I had a PowerPoint version, so it'd be full screen, so I apologize for that. I was just sharing off of the agenda item. Yeah, see.
We've each got it on our screens.
Yeah. Oh, great, great. So on capital infrastructure sales tax, this is where the ADA transition the program went to commission last spring, and what was proposed is a ramping up to the need, which is the 5.2, basically 5.2 million a year. And then from here on out, it would increase by inflation or escalation costs, but this is the amount needed per year for 20 years to address all of the sidewalks, all the existing sidewalks in town. So again, a ramping up of that funding. Street maintenance, we typically do 5 to 6 million out of this fund, but you will see that that is not sustainable by these last couple years of the CIP. There was a fund balance. You can see the fund balance here that we will be spending down by 2030.
Why isn't the street maintenance part of general fund?
It used to be, but in the last 3 years, it has lost its general fund. funding.
Why?
Just the challenges within the general fund, the
Mhm.
operating budget.
Mhm.
So contract street maintenance program, these that we put out for contract, all of that is funded now with other sources. We do have
Mhm.
our street maintenance crews,
Right.
or street crews, traffic crews. And so
Mhm.
those that are going out, and, fixing the potholes and doing some of mill and overlay on other areas, more
This-
reactive in some, the
Yeah.
smaller
What we, these
units.
are potholes or minor patches.
That's handled by city crews, and so
Right.
that's not part of this, and that is paid for out of the general fund.
Right.
But that pot gets smaller all the time.
Yes.
As our cost of doing business and employee compensation starts to just continue to eat away at what we have for expendable dollars. So it's a big problem for us.
A lot of conversation. That's probably gonna happen tomorrow. It's gonna be a long meeting.
It goes into the asset management side of things and lowest cost of ownership, which is what we've been driving towards, but
Yeah.
it's a problem that's very common everywhere.
Yeah.
We just got a little further behind before we started doing some of this work to catch up, so to speak. Some cities have been on top of it since they were, brought into being in the 1950s, like Overland Park. And then ones like Lawrence and say KCK or KCMO that are more historic communities really struggle. So,
And on average, we fund less than 60% of what we would need to based on asset management models in order to catch up and get to our PCI value of 70. You've heard that, I think, mentioned in previous conversations.
What
So
is the
pavement condition.
the pavement
index.
condition index
So we're
That's how we-
70.
grade this.
100 is the best. The potholes, smooth ride.
And 70 is our goal for all of it.
50 what?
We're at
We're
63.
at 63 now, okay. Then some of those major projects have come on.
Right.
Last place I worked was at 55 and declining.
Ooh,
Well.
Now, but if
in
you
Kansas
look
City,
at
Missouri.
I
residential,
forgot where you were before until you said
At Unified
that.
Government.
our residential is in the 50s. It's not great, but we are turning a residential focus after these last few arterial improvements. Yeah, so we did 23rd, we did 6th, Wakarusa reconstruction, a portion of Iowa reconstruction.
That's how
So-
you're seeing that number rise.
Right. And we'll be moving more in the next 5 years into neighborhoods with the street maintenance funds.
It's a good thing to be able to let people know.
Yeah. it
People
is.
care so much about potholes.
They randomly do, yes. Right.
When your entire life is revolving around driving and always has been, and your parents also has been, it makes sense. I mean, if that's
Yeah.
your only paradigm you've ever had, like this is the most important thing in the world to make bike lanes get out of here, right? Like I can see where people are coming from.
Yeah.
So it's just,
I mean, I care about potholes as somebody who uses bike lanes though, too, because that affects them. Yeah.
Just pavement management is really, it's critical and it does save you money over time to be able to invest in other things, but getting there is the challenge. Because once you get down to a certain point with your PCI, it's a lot more lift to get it up. And Melinda's team's fighting that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and our first responders appreciate when their vehicles can also.
Allow them
No,
to stick
yeah.
someone with the, the IV when they need to.
One thing that we did move out of the street maintenance program, again, just for transparency, was this project. We were getting a lot of comments. Understand the condition of Harvard. Between Castleton and Monterey, there's more potholes than non-pothole areas of pavement. And so we wanted everyone to know that is, instead of kind of being buried in the street maintenance program, we moved that out as a standalone project. So everyone's aware that is coming and when it's coming.
What is that ADA? Is that 19 million is the full amount or is that just?
Yes,
for
this
5
is
years?
everything.
Oh, that's for everything.
No, this is.
Just for 5 years.
This is for 5 years
That's
and this is for all the capital. There's no money in the operating for the
Right.
ADA for right of way.
But I can't remember, isn't the ADA transition plan longer than that 5-year period?
It's 20
That's what I
years
thought.
and about $100 million.
Okay,
So this is the 5 years.
yeah, it'll always be on there.
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. And then the sidewalk bike ped improvements, that's just catch-all? Is that broken down
That's the
further?
5-year bike ped plan that used to go to an MTC.
Okay.
So a lot of that is used for match on grant projects that have the bike ped components.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a 5-year plan for those separate as well.
And a lot of times what Melinda's trying to do is shift things just a little bit here or there with finance or me, like coming up with last minute idea for some reason. Shifting things to make us be able to go as far as we can with what we have monetarily. So it's the biggest, thing of Jenga or Tetris that you can come up with that we're always working with and on. So, yeah. And then we'll go to the governing body tomorrow, hear something else in the pile of stuff, but the pieces all move.
So this is one proposed plan, but there are some other options being presented to the commission. So previously we did have 3 Lawrence Loop projects on there and had a portion for design for the loop Queens Road to Castle. The construction was unfunded, but we did have 300,000. So this option here is showing still keeping that 300,000 in design. And then Michigan to Sandra Shaw, this is based on a need for, I think 400,000 of this is new. The remaining would be planned expenditures. That was if that had kind of moved forward by this summer. There was some property acquisition and there's been some delays on that. So an update on that project will be going to the commission soon. So where this is at, this project currently has budget. And then this portion there was going to be another 400,000 for that project just because of the delays. The construction costs have gone up.
The part that just has money for planning is the assumption that there would just be construction in the future, or?
There would be grant
Okay.
funds was the hope. And we do know those are more limited under the current administration. There are fewer opportunities for some of that. So in this 5 years, if that may be something that if it was designed, it might have to kind of sit on the shelf until a grant presented itself. Or if there was another revenue option, another revenue source that became available.
But you'd be shovel ready at that.
Right,
Right.
So
Yeah.
In the past has been historically a good thing with the federal government. So,
right.
or who knows?
yeah, if you got, sometimes the time frame on the grants could be a shorter window and you're not prepared, and if you got your design done, you're shovel ready.
It's how Overland Park and all, they get a lot of things
Yeah.
done.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then this is the portion downtown, so the loop from 7th Street to Constant Park. And so this we pushed out, I think yet again, it's been in the 5-year CIP and it kind of pushes out. There's been a couple different thoughts of where where exactly that would go. We're doing the updated bike plan this year. So hoping that.
Does
some
that
of
wrap
these-
up in November?
The goal was by the end of the year. I
Okay.
think November, but maybe we were telling everybody December, under promise over deliver, but. So a lot of these, the timing on these that are shown later out in the CIP, we would update that next February, March also whether they're on the funded or the unfunded list, we would be updating all projects that are in the CIP. We do that each spring.
I think whoever did that Excel spreadsheet did not calculate those numbers correctly on that second one.
On which one?
The totals under
Mhm.
each year. I
Oh, are they
mean,
not adding up correctly? I can let her
No.
know that feedback.
I don't know, it was 2.3.
yeah, so that like when you add that 836 in, the previous balance, it should be like 12 million.
This right here.
Yeah, so it adds that additional 836.
Well, she took a 500,000 from the street
Yeah,
maintenance
it dropped
program,
down.
took that out. So the street
Uh,
maintenance went down to 23.3 in this scenario where it was 25.6. So this second scenario is showing less for street maintenance in order to
Ah.
fund those.
And that also, but also just remember in the operating side, we're forecasting like
Yeah.
not growing, which means if we're not growing the amount that's in there, we're actually putting in less.
Right,
Because costs don't go down.
yeah, of
historically.
course,
So,
yeah, okay.
So if we're not growing population wise or,
The numbers each year, if we're not showing and accounting for escalation and inflation, if we had just a flat 5 million a year for street maintenance all the way through, year 5, you're doing a lot less than you are in year 1, but the same 5 million. Mhm. So they will be highlighting tomorrow night this option and that the difference is taken from street maintenance funding. So that moves another 2.3 million to the unfunded. And then general obligation bonds, they go into a little detail here. Melissa kind of went over a lot of that too.
I'm also supposed to remind you that they're bought by like mutual funds and things of that nature.
are they kind of the same entities that would do revenue bonds, just over a different
Yes.
backing? Okay,
Mhm.
that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, investment firms, banks are a lot of times the bidders.
Okay.
And how we do a lot of our geo debt funded projects is we do temp notes in the spring. We start design or we move into construction on the projects, those are funding. And we don't bond until the end of the project. What that does is ensures that we are bonding only the amount we actually spend on the project. So we authorize a project in the spring. If it's a brand new project, we sell the temp notes to get it started. No, we authorize in the fall, we sell the temp notes to get it started in the spring. And then let's say it takes a year of design, year of construction, we do temp notes each spring. We come around to that final spring, the project's done, we bond it. So that's kind of how it works. And so sometimes on the financial sheets, it looks a little odd because we're doing
Short-term
temp.
loan to
Right.
end up going into long-term financing. Does that make sense?
Yep. And they do look at, what kind of rate will we get on long-term versus short-term? What's the chance of us being able to spend this amount? Do we have multiple funding sources on a project? Like if we got into a situation where it made a lot more sense, it was more favorable to bond at the beginning because we knew there were maybe these other funding sources and we felt pretty confident in that bond amount. That's something finance looks at, like, let's just jump right to bonds. It could happen, but the market and the way we've been, at least the 6-7 years I've been doing the CIP, they've wanted to do the 1-year temp notes and then do permanent financing at the end, so. And then here's our list of geodebt funded projects. And these are general obligation projects that are not paid back by the enterprise fund, I think, or do they have those mixed in? I'm not seeing, I am seeing some.
Yeah.
Fits too.
So here they're not splitting it. On the worksheets, they typically split it to show how much is back by, paid back from the general fund versus the stormwater fund versus the solid waste fund. And so for here, I do see that they have it all together. So for instance, MSO campus phase 2, this is solid waste CMG. So but they're only showing the portion that is the general fund. So they show it at the top, but yet down here, oh, here you can see the general obligation bond revenues. This is where I can see it now. General fund, you see how it's 85 million? This is that 85 million.
Yep.
So these are the revenues from the temp note sales or bond sales. And then these are the projects that would fund. These are all general fund.
And typically, the governing body is only interested in what's happening with the general fund. Just. They don't
Because
get
we
as
have rate
worried
models.
about, yeah, the utilities. I've seen it both ways in communities here. We're working really hard to make sure that that doesn't become a problem for them, but, you know, we try to manage our rates, so. We've had pretty significant rate increases, but we're constantly looking at how we,
Our peers.
right,
Yeah.
try to manage that, and the utilities have been in better shape, say historically, so. Which is good, because they're regulated, and our water could poison you if we didn't do well, so.
So these are geo bond funded projects, right? Not general fund projects. Some of these are quite small and they seem like a cemetery maintenance. $430,000 to bond against seems pretty tiny. Like
Mhm.
why bond that?
They were not able to get that into their general fund operating budget.
Oh, okay, so that's why you see smaller one-offs like that.
Department bargaining,
Yeah.
another small.
Yeah, well, and this one is a total of 775,000 over 4 years.
Mm.
And so this is just the last 2 years of it. So they've gone through design. They're gonna be doing construction. This is another portion for construction. And then this last 150 can be used to add, you know, some more chargers or look at, doing something with the canopies. So it has those components in there. They'll have the parking expansion done and some sustainability elements completed in 2026.
But in some instances, it's simply because we don't carry enough cash on hand.
Right.
In our general fund that causes something like this to have to tip over into here. And again,
Right.
it better have that from an asset management standpoint. We're hoping that whatever that cemetery shop is, should last 30 to 40 years, right? With some basic maintenance being done when it should. So,
Yeah,
That makes
it is a replacement, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
so then it doesn't feel as bad when you know it's something like a house where it's supposed to have a longer life. Where if it was, 5-year, something you get rid of after 5 years, we wouldn't want to see it in here. Right.
The only new item that appeared here was the 27th Street Bridge. It has been listed as unfunded in the CIP over the last 5 years, or at some points it was funded in later years. It's kind of bounced on and off, and we've pushed it out based on, we get bridge inspections of all of our bridges and submit those to KDOT every 2 years. Well, we did bridge inspections last year, and now it's in need of repair, and they say in the next 3 years, we need to get it repaired. So that's why it is now been elevated. So what we had to do is actually reduce the amount that was previously shown in street maintenance in order to put something on this list, we're having to take.
So again, that's where street maintenance, because it's kind of not a project, it's many little things that need to be done that are,
Mhm.
again, extending the life of the asset or doing, stuff that people are complaining to us about. It always gets hit, so.
Hmm.
Cause it's typically the bigger pot of money, just cause it's really expensive to maintain streets.
Yeah,
Unless.
and it's not called out for specific locations.
Right,
So people are like, oh, and you'll just do a little less. Just-
right, and if we get too specific with it, then we can't use it the way we need to,
Right.
so.
What is the 27th Street Bridge? I gotta be honest with you, I don't fully understand.
Sitting here trying to think of
What
that
bridge
is.
where? Is it bike or?
Is it a bus? Is it a bus?
So let's say you were at the traffic light on K10, Wakarusa 27th,
Way over there.
and you took 27th from that area east, and then you get to a curve. There is a
Yeah.
bridge there. That is the 27th Street Bridge.
Okay, I know what you're talking.
It's an old, probably county bridge that we've assumed, correct?
Construction map.
Possibly.
I'm not sure. Maybe way back.
Way back.
I'm not sure the history of that.
I was too shy to ask that question.
I don't know very much about anything
No,
west
it's
of
a
like
bridge, yeah.
castles, honestly, so I'm still kind of learning about that.
The other change that will be discussed in some later slides here, we won't go into too much because it's not connected city, but previously Biomed Station 7 was also shown on the CIP as funded. It has been removed to the unfunded list. So it is part of the discussion about how to fund the operations as well as this second station. It's being pulled together as a conversation. They also removed the fire apparatus that was assigned to Station 6, although that is also going to be a discussion because there's no fire apparatus in the 5-year CIP. So there's going to be talks of what that means if you're not replacing any of your fire trucks over a 5-year period.
So I was gonna ask, is fire apparatus just fancy word for truck? Like.
Yes.
But like,
Well,
one
there's-
bigger.
I think
Yeah, there's a variety of different type of fire apparatus, so.
there's Quints, I don't even know all of
I mean, yeah. and-
Aerial ladders, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, aerials, yeah, and so just, and then there's just engines or trucks that carry water with
Yeah.
the ability to pull out hoses. I mean, we're not fire
Yeah.
or police officers, but they get more expensive,
Mhm.
every year. They're very expensive vehicles, so.
I thought there was a vehicle capital improvement plan that was separate from
It's,
the,
It
Oh,
was back in the
actually.
day, so we had it separate in 2021, 2022, and I think in 23, we put it all
It
back.
wasn't here when I got here.
Right.
okay.
Yeah, I think
22.
22 was the last year of it being separate. So we had a vehicle and equipment replacement program, a VERP, we called it.
That's equipment.
Right, and then we had a maintenance plan, a 5-year maintenance plan. So 5-year VERP, 5-year maintenance plan, and then we had the 5-year CIP.
Currently, Vernon is a voluntary employee.
It has a different acronym meaning now. But those 3 separate ones,
We all go by.
we're causing confusion having the 3 separate kind of split out. It was hard to see things when they were spread across 3 different lists.
Mhm.
So they pulled it all back together.
Okay,
But it also makes it harder for vehicles to compete.
Correct.
yes. This would be like-
On this CIP prioritization guideline, it doesn't typically compete as well. So Fire Med, they did have, they called out electric trucks. They were hybrid,
Mhm.
just,
We thought they were actually electric.
yeah, we thought they were electric only. They were hybrid. But they put those on there because they could get those in a 12 to 18 month lead time, and they could get better scoring. It was in alignment with the plan to replace, with the ordinance to replace everything with electric fleet. However, the cost was not quite, maybe double.
Yeah.
I'm estimating, but about double. If they go
Definitely
with.
by the time we had to do all the stuff to the buildings.
Right. So if they go with the diesel option, though, it's 48 months. So the conversation is if they need to replace things over this 5-year CIP, they better have it in year 1 or 2, or it's not, it's gonna take 48 months for them to get it once they order it.
Whoa.
Right.
Fire trucks.
Very long lead time.
One of the questions that come into the new connected
They
city.
also last a long time.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah.
it's not a
15
best,
years
it's
is
not a
their
best practice,
best
but
practice.
yeah.
15 years is best practice.
They, the plan for Fire Med is 10 years as a primary, then 5 years as reserve. They have been pushing each of those a couple years, so they've been keeping some things as primary for 11, 12 years,
Mhm.
and then moving them into reserve for 6 or 7.
It needs to be more of a conscious decision because then on the backside, we have the maintenance that we have to take
Mhm.
care of. And there's money, no matter where you put it, it's how you're spending the money. It's just like your own personal vehicle. You can drive one longer, but you're gonna have certain maintenance things that you
Mhm.
didn't have in the first 100,000 miles that you're gonna have in the next 200. So that's kind of
Right.
the challenge we face. And sometimes those conversations aren't as connected as they need to be between our garage folks and the department. So so that's work we have to do.
So it sounds like, if I understand, and I kind of was cottoning on to this a few months ago, that fire and police stuff is, or really just emergency services in general, is definitely not under the jurisdiction and scope of this
Connected City.
committee, yeah. Which is interesting because it's very much transportation, but it's also very much not MSO. So like, is there any oversight of it at all, or is it just straight to city
That's
convention or?
the Safe and Secure Outcome Team, and the advisory board.
Is there one? I heard there being a police review board, but I don't,
Yeah.
It's in a safe and secure.
yeah, like there's an outcome,
It's,
but there's no. So, yeah, and I know it's kind of off topic, but it's just kind of curious that like, there's no citizen board looking at like trucks, right? Or like, should we be doing electric or diesel, or how long was lead time? Is there any opportunity for
We
refurbished or
do
small?
have a fleet within MSO. So the garage, central maintenance garage and the fleet, and Robert, our fleet manager, he does weigh in on those conversations.
But it's something that we haven't explored with you yet, but it's definitely something that, as we get maybe into the fall, would be interesting. Also to talk about how we're changing their operations when we move, like some of the enhancements that the new facility will have, and kind of getting you to understand all of that, because again, these things that don't occur in here or do occur in here have implications on the back end. So
Right.
as a resident, it's important to understand.
Okay, glad to hear we'll be maybe hearing more about it. I think the main concern from my standpoint is that anytime you talk about trying to maybe downsize streets or, decrease lane size in the service of making things safe for the fire department is the first to weigh in and say like, nope, can't do it. We're not gonna be able to fit our giant truck down. And then if you start reading kind of into the word zeitgeist of what's going on, is that American fire trucks are gigantic. It's like, really need to quite that big? We have like 8-story buildings max here, right? So like, what's going on? But since there's nobody transportation related who's overseeing that, it's like, well, they're just gonna do what they need to satisfy whatever NFPA says they need to do this year without really thinking of like.
Did you go to city manager school?
No, I just really like,
How do you know all this?
it's fascinating.
It
a rabbit hole.
is, but it's hard. And if you're talking about being and from like a planning perspective, yes, those are best practices on that side. And then they have their set that come into direct. And so it becomes a community conversation that
Right.
drives how the governing body works with their fire department.
And it sounds like.
It's not an easy one because they will bring everybody out and,
Oh, yeah.
to talk about it.
Right,
So-
but there are some communities who are finally kind of coming to grips with like, is the answer bigger and bigger things or to like rethink what we do here, because like other countries don't burn down and they seem to be doing fine with small trucks.
Yeah.
I'm still not clear on your earlier question, though, like what's the citizen engagement on that question?
I don't think there.
Is there a
it currently is.
sustainability?
And I think that's why,
Nobody.
That it would fall under?
like if there's two opposing sides and the public or the financial one doesn't really have any say in it, and that like NFPA essentially through Lawrence Douglas County Fire Department kind of gets the entire conversation, like we're gonna get a very predictable result. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault or job, it's like, how can we reimagine how to talk about this? So, I mean, that's a retreat.
I'd love to hear more or have more conversation about this, because it is,
Yeah.
it is something that's important. And it is, if you look at, even just how we design and construct roads, you look at the weight of trucks, the weight of buses and the weight of fire apparatus, that all of that has to kind of come into the play too as well.
so sorry for bringing it up here, because it.
Oh, there's no,
Probably agree anymore.
because it does go back to our fleet side, which is part of Connected City, so.
Yeah, and I think on fleet, we have the EV transition study we did that study was presented to the Environmental Sustainability Board. But again, that didn't focus on the operational decisions of what
Right.
pieces were there. It was a little bit broader look.
Yeah, fire trucks in Japan are really small. And I remember looking at this fire truck size issue in Austin came up, like, well, why are the trucks so big? And they were renaming roads in memory of some famous person, and the fire truck size became part of the conversation for the first time because they had to go through all the deeds on these homes. Anyways, long story short, then I started learning more about fire truck sizes in other countries, and I was like, well, they are smaller and cheaper elsewhere too. I don't know though. I mean, and then the other.
Well, and the
yeah.
American system is, the goal is to contain it to the room of origin.
It's a higher
Mhm.
In other countries, the standard is different, okay?
Yeah.
So whether I would think in parts of Europe, it's probably contained to the structure,
Mm.
Not
Um,
the root.
not the room of origin. So that impacts all sorts of things. That's
Yeah.
what our customs culture expectations are
Yeah.
here. So those are things that, I mean, this is a very big weighty conversation when you start going down that road.
Mhm.
I think it overlaps with Connected Cities, though, as they were talking about like expanding 19 so that emergency vehicles can get around. But I'd never heard that as a
Yeah.
different option, like, well, what if we just got different vehicles? Like, do we have to make the roads different?
We even may have to make the water distribution system different, the hydrants. So like in other countries, they have higher pressure hydrants, like Philadelphia tried that, and you can still see the defunct high pressure fire hydrants everywhere, but like it's a different way of thinking. Here, we carry the water and we carry the pumps. There, they already have the water and the pumps before you go. It's kind of a different idea. So,
Mm.
but that's a much bigger conversation.
Yeah, interesting.
But it's something fundamentally this country will eventually have to get to, because
Yeah.
the sustainability of the financial side of the world of how municipalities runs, the cost out of general funds, which is your property tax backed funds and sales tax backed funds primarily, they're struggling because there's a definite inverse in what comes in versus what needs to go out to maintain
Right.
aging systems where there's no growth.
Right.
So, and growth can mask it over time. So if you're growing, it kind of masks it, but once you stop growing, that quickly catches up. So anyway, never mind this. I'm only talking about that fiscal side of the commitment. I'm not talking about all the other stuff. that you're doing.
Sounds like we're very much on the same page. So I'm curious to see where this goes. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Sorry, Melissa. I'm sure there was a train of thought that we may have interrupted there.
No, that's all right. We'll go on. Here it does talk about, again, those changes from the last CIP. So the West Lawrence Spray Park was listed for this year. That has been moved unfunded. It was put on pause. Station 7 expansion, Station 6 apparatus, and then the 27th Street Bridge now shows up, and we covered that with funds that were allocated previously to street maintenance. Here they're talking about the stations, again, the stations, so I'm gonna skip over that.
That's where we'll spend most of our time.
Yeah,
Just so you-
tomorrow night, we will spend most of the time probably on those slides.
There's not an advocacy group that specializes in connected city advocacy to the extent that you would see someone coming in and advocating their,
Perfect.
right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the national organization.
So unfunded needs, here it is, identifying that our goal, our KPI is measuring our progress at getting toward that pavement condition index goal of 70. And right now, our current PCI is 63, and we're really projecting we might get to 64, 65 with current funding levels, but we will not be able to get up to that 70. And then I would
Take to like move that number, like besides funding.
It takes
can
a
you give me some
while.
Reference point, like.
Do you want to come in back and do that? I
That
think
would
that would
probably
be
be
a
good,
really
'cause
good
we were
one.
looking at if we were fully funded, would we get there in 10 or 20 years? That's
Okay.
kind of our hope was in that 10 to 20 year mark. But at a certain
Again,
point,
that's
we're actually gonna
cost
go
of
back.
ownership too. So yeah, we'll drop it off. So I think we could, this is a good one that I'll write down, is that we should come back and really talk about that because it impacts a lot of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was gonna ask about should 70 be the goal on every single street? Or are we okay with kind of crappy streets on the side streets where we want people to drive slowly and as soon as we relieve them,
Like.
but don't narrow
I
the
was like,
street?
don't drive there. you can just-
Natural speed bumps.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Those pretty streets where your teeth are like shaking yourself.
Yeah.
I'm totally okay with the parking lot, that thing.
I know, I'm like, can we convert 14th to gravel?
That is a conversation.
It's actually better from a green perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry. Maybe not from the dust on your vehicle, but.
Yeah, what service level does the community expect or want to fund? And it's like, well, counties have roads that are gravel. Is that something?
Omaha does, in city limits.
Omaha.
Which is wild. It's relatively recently they basically like de-paved their streets. They're like, we do not have
Mass
money for
will
this.
be
So-
gravel soon, if the road is just gonna.
Where at? Where are you shop?
14th Street.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
But I think we should just let it die. I told her, don't drive on it, don't walk on it, don't bike on it, just, pretend it's not there. Like,
So one thing I did want to highlight
Yeah,
though,
this
our
is a big
capital
deal.
infrastructure sales tax that is funding primarily the ADA transition plan and street maintenance, as well as that's where those loop projects could fit in. And even some of the fire apparatus, the way the sales tax is currently worded can be paid for by that. It's a dedicated 0.3%. It does expire in March of 2029. So now it's on that horizon that we need to be looking at. We're reviewing the renewal and the potential increase to support these unfunded capital needs.
When would it go to the ballot?
Is it 28 or was it late 27?
I think.
Just to give an opportunity to do another, right?
Right, we'll
They were
give
shooting for
ourselves
all
2
of it.
rounds in case it fails the first time, just
Uh-huh.
internal politics, but that's something we'll want to talk about here, to get your guys' input on is sort of that, and then be able to share it with a larger approach that the governing body will take with the city manager's office.
Mhm.
So it'd be important to look at that, because we also have the transit sales tax in the kind of the same mix too, so.
Timing.
Okay.
Yes, so that gets to be a pretty weighty conversation for folks that are the taxpayers, so.
I think especially if and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but especially if street maintenance is gonna stay as part of capital sales tax funded projects, we really have to look at increasing that, you know, because of capitalization costs over the future, you know, and escalations.
And we have added the ADA transition
Yeah.
plan that was not, when this originally went through and was voted on, that wasn't going to be 5 million a year out of that fund. That was a decision made last year. So we had been putting some ADA sidewalk projects that had been funded out of
Yeah.
cap sales, but the full plan being a 20-year plan to address that, that has been a regulatory need, and it's something that has been needed for 3 decades now, since
Yeah.
the mid-nineties. But it scores very high, of course, because it hits all of
Yeah.
those areas of the strategic plan, including the regulatory and equity and inclusion. So, I mean, that did shift what that fund used to be able to cover.
Yeah, then maybe it's like
Priority program.
called the ADA and street projects tax or something like that, you know, to make it explicit to voters what it is.
Right now, it's got a very wide, a wide
Definition of that, yeah.
definition and that works for and against it. And I think that's where the community dialogue and conversation is gonna have to come in, is really how much can this fund? What should we, you know, be able to say we're gonna do with it? So, and that's
Should
gonna
we
be.
narrow the focus and be very specific that it's gonna be for these things? Should there be 2? I don't know that that would be more successful, though, splitting it up and saying this funds these things and this will fund
Yeah.
these, you know, that's.
Can you give me, like, what kinds of projects is it funding?
So over the past 5 years, 6 years, 7, that the city's had a CIP. The projects we've seen on there are fire med vehicles, it's because it can fund that. Some fire med equipment can be funded out of it. Loop projects, sidewalk, bike ped, and then street maintenance. And I mean, I think that's about it. I don't know if it can fund, I don't think it can fund anything that has like the enterprise funds. You can't fund any utilities like storm or water or wastewater, but thinking that was about it.
And that's pretty
broad.
Yeah, those first few make sense to me. In my neighborhood in East Lawrence, so we have all these beautiful curb cuts with like the bumps when you're about to go into the intersection,
Mhm.
and then you get onto the sidewalk and it is like treacherous for a fully able-bodied person with bricks sticking up and tree roots, and so like,
We're coming to a street or a sidewalk near you.
We now have a brick
good.
policy that was finished last year, and we're addressing that with the ADA transition.
Okay.
Yeah, please be kind to us when we show up and say we'd like to replace it, because
well, we already replaced our sidewalk, so I'm
Yeah.
glad for you to replace everyone else's.
Yeah.
Walking in the road where I live, just.
safety first.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the curb cut is the only safe part of that sidewalk, and it's,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, because for a while we had money for the ADA ramp program. But
That makes
even though the
sense.
sidewalk itself was not,
Interesting.
Baby steps.
yeah. So let's see, I did want to just highlight that we have over 100 projects that are partially or fully unfunded in the proposed CIP. That the unfunded request adds up to 470 million. And that is projects that city departments have proposed as well as the public. So our request this year alone was over 140 million in new projects that came through during that open request.
Not helpful.
Right, so these are the questions that they're gonna focus on. It's going to be, should cap sales tax, should we look at that proposal with street maintenance or also include some of those early design and planning costs for the loop? That second scenario, are there any unfunded and funded projects that should swap? Any projects that should be delayed or reprioritized? So those are all relative to Connected City. Then here talks about next steps, kind of breaking down what happens between now and September. And then once you get to these pages, this is a full list of all the proposed projects. And so just wanted to highlight here, you can do like a Control F if you're looking for a specific project. But it will tell you how it's funded. So these are just listed as unfunded here. But for instance, here with Station 6, you'll see what its funding is. It's all geodebt. But when there's a split, you'll see something here like MSO campus. It does show you the breakdown for phase one is geo, revenue, stormwater. And this is the portion that will be spent in 2026. So that construction started last year in December, groundbreaking and
That's when it'll go to the actual non-temporary debt.
right. At the end of 26. So in the spring of 27, it will go to actual debt.
And then we'll start our
For the
repayments.
geo side. And then on phase two, this shows you the breakdown of the 61 million over those next 2 years. We have about 3.5 million that's being spent this year with its design and the start of construction at the end of the year with some GMP to get started on site work or equipment.
This is where I saw that solid waste debt. So it is, so it's not a bond, obviously, because it's too small of a department to be able to do a bond, but
Will be,
It's
this
a-
right here.
No, it's too small of an enterprise to be considered an enterprise fund for revenue bonds.
Revenue bond, not a revenue bond. It is
Yeah.
geo,
Yeah,
oh,
general obligation debt paid back from storm or from solid waste rates.
that's what that means. Okay.
but if the solid waste rates could not cover it, it would have to be covered by the general fund,
Mhm.
which is the sales tax and property tax backing.
Okay.
I missed that we're getting a second outdoor aquatic facility.
We're not gonna.
It's
Of the
funded.
many projects.
Very unfunded.
Oh, okay.
It is so unfunded that it's not, yeah.
Pie in the sky there.
Oh, yeah, I see that now, right there.
We'll see projects on here,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
whether from departments or from the public. There are some projects on here that might.
Yeah, I need to zoom my
Yeah.
screen. in.
Project.
I couldn't even see where it said unfunded.
I see that the JR watershed, lower and upper reach are unfunded, but I thought those are actively like part of the Ninth Street.
The middle reach that
No.
goes from between Seventh and Eighth on Tennessee, there right by the pool,
Hmm.
all the way up to Ninth and Mississippi.
Okay,
So that portion is the middle reach and that is funded
okay,
and underway right now.
right.
When,
Very much so.
oh, sorry, when people put in proposals, do they assign the dollar amount or does city staff assign the dollar amount?
They assign the dollar amount, we review it. If it's something that scores pretty high, we do take an even closer look at it. Some of it, we might not necessarily have the expertise to say whether that is reasonable. For example, there was a proposed development, a building, like a spec building to
Oh,
be
yeah.
built. In 2026, it was over 10 million, I think, and we said, we're not, it scored kind of low. We're not the experts in costing that out, so we'll just leave it as how they proposed it. But if someone submits a trail project, we can look at the extents of what they're looking at, look at current prices, and we can adjust, and then we let them know we adjusted what you had as a proposed budget for these reasons.
And often their guess is very low if they're not an internal partner or don't have some real intensive outside expertise.
Yeah.
Because it's just like me, when I guess on a project for my house, I'm always way low. But if I guess here at work, I'm normally pretty close.
You learn to be conservative after a couple of
And
years.
she doesn't guess, she knows.
Yeah.
So,
And then the year, do they put in the year that they want it to be
Mhm.
done in? Okay,
They do.
okay.
And so if it's
Yes.
unfunded,
First
you'll
year.
see a whole bunch in 26, and
Yeah.
at this view, you don't get to see it. Well, maybe here. Does it give a total at the bottom?
It's funny though, because.
There's a lot of projects.
Proposed like playground equipment
There you go.
improvement, and they were like, do it in 5 years.
So here you can see a lot of new projects went in year one, so
Yeah.
157 million. And then these later years, this is more what you'd see about 40 million a year.
Okay, interesting.
On the prioritization matrix, how does risk fit in there? Like,
Oh,
like
wait.
I've been seeing in the news, fire trucks being slow to respond, and I would think that'd be a reputational risk to the city, but maybe that's just not even in here, or is that in the regulatory piece?
There, I would assume, are you assuming we're slow to respond or is it Casey?
fire.
Emerald?
No, here.
Oh, here, okay. That's probably a different situation than the trucks. It's probably manning.
Sure, whatever it is,
Right.
but like,
The
Yeah.
recent article.
yeah, when I'm assessing a project at work, part of it is like, what's the risk if we don't do this and it goes really wrong or
Mhm.
no?
Yeah, we have that.
So when we do
full
controlled
for
burns
our
because we didn't-
regulatory.
Mhm.
So regulatory is gonna be assessing risk,
Okay.
but also so is our asset management, which is a larger component.
There's a risk matrix on asset management.
Yeah, so those two are pulling it in. So you've got two of the 10 categories that for sure are looking at that. But also the sound fiscal stewardship component,
Mhm.
you know, we have a lot of lenses that are gonna be picking up risk.
Well,
Intention.
even some of equity and inclusion looks at, is there a difference in services, that this project's gonna address? And so service area can be impacted by that if you have a gap in a service area or a delay. Yeah. And I was looking at this again, this is the funded, so here on the total unfunded, this is where you can see where the majority of the projects are kind of in those first few, sorry. Some of these that are across the board are like street maintenance, if it was unfunded, $10 million in 27, 28, 29, 30, yeah. It's showing up in the unfunded, but the reason this number is higher is because it's also what we already have under contract, under construction, like the Jayhawk watershed, Maple, MSO campus, the aquatic center projects underway. A lot of these show up as that funded 26 amount, and some of them are already under a construction contract too. And then this is where you will see, for a particular fund, it broken down what's funded and unfunded. So this is the general fund list. So here you can see some of those other smaller projects were listed here as unfunded. And so there was discussion of moving like the cemetery replacement. And then here's the breakdown for GO. So if I can go, for instance, here's the CAP infrastructure sales tax. And you can see the projects. There's a few other projects that we have as connected city projects on the unfunded list. Some of these, this one would be, we have it here listed as Mississippi Street Gateway Improvement Project. So this is improving Mississippi from 9th to 11th. So there was a recent MOU about the Gateway project. This would be one of those things. It mentioned specifically Upper Reach, Jayhawk, as well as this, that some of that funding that's coming to the city could pay for
From the STAR bonds.
from the STAR bonds. So I wanted to mention that one because that one may come back to this group as, with that MOU where.
And that has a very
Design.
limited scope of things that it could cover that had to be negotiated as part of the STAR bond work that
Right.
KU is doing with the city. So
Yeah, so stormwater improvements in that watershed as well as these street improvements through that, and looking at, bike ped facilities in the 2-block area as well. So it's unfunded right now until all that gets finalized. But that would be part of the discussion. We had dynamic messaging, so I was trying to see what else we might have on here.
where's the
Um,
bollards? Sorry, that's a sidebar.
Yeah, that was not on here.
Don't go there.
These that just have these numbers 2 and 3, that was a citizen submitted or a resident submitted project. And so we did confirm and look through, the costs on those projects. So those are connected city. Just wanted to mention those are 2 trail projects, or this is a trail project and this is a reconfiguration of Tennessee and Kentucky that was proposed.
In the trolley project, but is somehow only 14 million, which sounds like it would be a lot more expensive than that. That was another resident request. I had to look through like, okay, that makes much more sense. There's no way the city's proposing this. That's
So
what it feels.
If you see it with one of these project numbers, we have a certain way we figure our project numbers. And so some of these, like, if it just has a single number, then it was likely not us that submitted it. So this one way to look at it a little.
And we do have like self-restraint, like we're not submitting just like pie in the sky, like,
Yeah.
Great ideas that we have is.
We've been in the trenches too long to
Yeah,
understand the reality of
Yeah.
the situation.
So
it's
then
really the needs.
Gas.
Not the want.
Yeah. gas tax also, that's that third fund that's funding street maintenance. So here's the portion that goes to street maintenance. And then these are vehicles replaced for our street crews out of that fund. And so you can see other things that it could pay for, but those are unfunded right now.
And the idea here, that was one of the moves we made right after I started here, was trying to not fund bodies out of here because these taxes vary, and the more electrified we become, the less, increase over time, depending on the ups and downs of the oil market. So you really don't want to pay for bodies out of this fund, and we were heavily into the body side. So that's some stuff that moved again. If you were to go back and try to like look in the past forward, well, we've put the personnel back in the general fund.
So it had an impact to the general fund, but we
But we
had
also moved
city
stuff
employees
out.
funded out of gas tax before, which was not a best practice. You should not do that.
So anyway,
City employees were funded by the gas tax?
Yes,
Just
Yes.
making sure I heard that right.
Yeah,
yes, street
which-
crews were funded from
Right.
gas tax.
Okay.
And instead now they're in the general fund and street maintenance program.
Okay.
And specific equipment is all that we're funding from gas tax.
Mhm.
And then airport fund, anything you want to say on this one?
most of this, you'll see, if you
These are
look
the
at our
matches.
grant side, this is just our match. So, our taxiway rehab project normally is somewhere between, I would say most 15%, least 5%, depending on which pot of funds we're using from which time period. But so these would be the matches. So when we're operating the airport, we're trying to be able to cover the matches plus pay for operation and maintenance at the airport. And Melinda's team's worked really hard with our airport manager, who's going to be leaving us here shortly. He's one of the verbs. Back to that word. Yeah, and we have a lot going on here, but there's more that could be done out there, but these are the kind of necessity projects. There's been a lot of federal funds over the last 4 to 5 years going into airport, which has been beneficial to us because we had a lot of needs. So with limited costs for match, but
Is the airport money, sorry.
it does not make money.
I think
It's a loss
probably,
leader right
yeah,
now.
that's what I was gonna ask. And what percent of the city uses the airport?
No.
It's hard because there's this connection to economic development and other
Yeah.
things, so it's hard to.
We have some quantification that we've worked with the chamber on, but the goal is to get to being more self-sufficient. And if you go back and watch our airport advisory board from about a week and a half ago, you will see me telling them that that's where we're headed. And there was a general consensus that that was a good thing to do. So we will be doing a lot of work in that space over the next year or two. But it's not killing anything in the general fund.
Yeah, no, it's not a lot of money, but-
$100,000, but my promise to the city manager is to have it not be taking money from the general fund. So that's the general direction I'm headed with it, and that it self-funds itself to the extent feasible.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And the general fund's only there if it needs a backstop for some reason, but it shouldn't.
So this one we recently updated, just here in the last, couple months, because in April we received a $660,000 dollar grant. And so here's our match for that.
Yeah. And we're just completing a master plan this fall for the airport, and that'll show, probably show some other projects that we haven't maybe been carrying here. And then we are also finishing a replat on the airport, which will allow, hopefully expedite development when the time presents itself for us.
Here's the revenue bonds. Again, we saw this on a slide, but here's the unfunded list down below. And here you can see those that we've considered, they're more development driven, they're capacity issues, or maybe development in a certain area where it's going to require these.
New roofs.
Right.
So development can mean many things. New roofs,
New
new
roofs.
rooftops.
So
The year 2 of this plan and revenue is different than you thought. What kind of flexibility do you have to move things on or off the funded list?
yeah, we look,
You look every
we
year,
look 5 years out, even in the rate model, to make sure we're good.
but you're still
for that
looking
5
like,
years.
so next year. this
We look at it
Start
again
all
every
over
year.
again.
We update the rate model every year with what actually came in for revenues and expenditures the previous year.
I will track an impressive amount of detail.
She does. I rely on her and her team.
Yeah.
How many engineers do you have again?
Well, we have 12 project managers and almost all of them are licensed engineers.
Just a high level for our community, but it's because we have so much going on.
Yeah.
And some of their costs are actually offset by the debt issuance that we do, which
Yeah.
is something that Melinda worked on with the finance director many years ago, and we just finally got it up and going. So we're actually charging their costs back to the debt when we issue it.
Yeah, some of our peers, like the city of Olathe and others, they were, the positions were funded by the projects they were managing. And so we track our hours that we spend working on bonded projects on the geo debt side. And we charge the project. And so those funds come back into the general fund to then offset the salary costs for those individuals. Because if we were to outsource that management versus being inside, it was like 3 times as much. So it was better to hire the positions and do it at less cost. Plus, we have better management when it's something that, yeah.
Yeah.
As a project manager, I know I'm gonna turn that over to facilities or to someone on the water wastewater side, and they're gonna remind me every day if I mess something up on that project, as they have to live with the issues, so.
Yep.
So a little more vested.
It's
in-
pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So the other connected city, federal fund exchange, we do have this funding source. I didn't mention this, I guess you could say is the 4th funding source. This is money that comes from KDOT back to us. So we submit street maintenance
Yes,
projects.
This is assuming it continues the way that it's been going.
That is accurate. Yes, this is about what we've been getting the
an
last couple of
assumption.
years. Mhm.
Take that word however you want.
That's passed through from KDOT right there?
Yes, but some years we haven't applied it to street maintenance, like we used it for the PED Bridge on South Iowa that's going in with those improvements with the SLT. There's the bridge that's gonna go up just on the north side of
So it has some flexibility as long as it's
Mhm.
adjacent.
So we have been able to.
When is
utilize
that
it for some
happening?
things. Actual construction, I don't know if it'll actually be complete in 26, but I know it'll start construction in 26. They're working on that interchange now, but the bridge is to the north of it, so it doesn't require the foundations as early on.
Thought we'd see that bridge come up. That was one of those projects that I feel like was very pie in the sky for a while. And like, here we are, it's actually gonna be under construction.
It's gonna happen.
Go figure. It can't happen.
Yeah, and we got additional funds for that even from KDOT, so that was great.
Mhm.
So here's the federal grant. So here's where you see money for like Mass Street that's coming from federal grants and
And
for
just-
the loop and for
And
taxway.
you've seen some stuff in the papers about federal funds and sort of the Lawrence response. Know that that weighs very heavily on this team because many things touch
Right.
federal dollars in some way, whether it's direct or indirect. So we're on the assumption that we're on the path to be able to receive those going forward. If something changes, you will start to see where the dominoes fall.
Mhm.
Okay?
That's kind of what I figured, yeah.
And then state grants show up here.
And a lot of the state grants come through pass-through dollars from the feds in some way, shape or form.
So it
Often
could also be
not.
impacted.
Yeah. So just understand again that
State grant
we're
doesn't
very
necessarily
sensitive
mean-
to
yeah.
what we're dealing with our federal partners at this point.
There's more of a lag time there, though. I think with state grants, they might already have the funds in hand.
Yes.
So it's good to see that there's not too much in out years for state grants. They
Well, we
run on-
won't necessarily count on them either. Sometimes we already have,
Mhm.
cash on hand.
And then- So there is the downtown station, I guess I'll mention for transit.
Yep.
Connected city as well, so we do show the state grant in 2027 and the transit funds portion in 2027. Solid waste funds just shows vehicle replacement, stormwater funds, so these are all the cash projects because the debt funded stormwater is on the geo debt page, so this is where you would find the cash. The biggest change we had to this is previously we had put basically in this program, the annual program, we know between that and specific called out projects, we could spend, 2.5, 3 million a year. So we had placeholders in there. So now we have reduced the program down to 500,000 because we've put in 1.5 million to 2.5 million of specific identified projects that came out of our asset ID program. So now we know kind of what those top 10 priorities are, and we're starting to fit them in by name. Again, that helps with the transparency of where we're going, but we do always need some cash that's on hand and available if we need to go and do a whole bunch of inlet replacements. We have a sinkhole that we need to address, something like that. We need to have the cash on hand. And then here's cash on the water wastewater fund side. So it's kind of hard to know, but this is the cash. We've had questions about that before because it does say fee revenues, but.
And it is one of those things, looking at whether we pay for something in cash versus we pay for it in debt. And do you move it up, move it back? I mean, those are conversations that, I mean, Melinda's in year round.
Mhm. And the cash has a much bigger impact in the rate model to rates. If you said we were going to spend 5 million cash versus 5 million spread out over 20 years.
Or 25 or
Right.
30.
So there's a certain amount of cash we have to have on hand, which means then the following year, you know, we need to spend a certain amount of cash each year, but also hold some in reserves. So
Because we have
it's a balance.
fund balance, kind of minimums or thresholds of what we have to carry on hand, for the governing bodies. Regulations they've set for us.
Yeah, and that also helps maintain our credit rating, which gives us the best rates
Mhm.
on our money, and we're not paying extra interest. And let's see, parking fund, that's about it. So I will not go through the remaining 200 pages. But if you have specific questions on a project, I can pull up its project detail page. It does have some pages here that kind of goes through things in more detail than what the slide showed. So good reference. You can get any of that.
My general plan was actually to, now that I have a baseline, what's going on with the funding, and I'm able to look at it a lot more, I guess, effectively, would be to go through the projects that are of interest and see like what's on the cusp of being funded, what is funded, just kind of go through this. I may come back with questions later. Would it be best to just?
We can actually put an agenda item on for the next meeting, because again, nothing's set in stone with the governing body
Exactly.
until later, obviously, for you to be able to ask questions of us, and clarify anything, and especially if you hear stuff out with, your fellow residents and they have questions. We can absolutely talk about those at our meeting in July and just kind of go over anything that you might be able to help folks understand in layman's terms.
Yeah,
So,
could we put page 20, that list of policy questions on the agenda for next time, like street maintenance or Lawrence Loop, unfunded projects swap with funded, yeah, these ones.
Yeah.
I think
that's being.
spending some time with this, we could probably, but I think this group could talk about that, like I'm normally a bike trail zealot, but I actually think the Lawrence Loop should wait.
okay, and then also we talked about, just having it come back as a general item for any questions
Yeah.
after you've had more time to digest.
Yeah,
Okay.
it could be a general item with these questions to kind of guide that
Okay.
conversation.
And if you guys come up with anything over the next, couple of weeks before we have to start working on the next agenda, let us know, because then that can give Melinda and her team or Trevor and his team time to prep a more thoughtful set of information to bring back, like kind of like these slides. So,
And during that time, there will be the meeting tomorrow and any discussion and direction we get from commission tomorrow, as well as their July meeting where they're looking at the city manager's
Yeah.
operating recommendation for operating budget as well as CIP. And then we meet on the 21st of July. So we will see both of those commission meetings.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I will not be at that meeting in St. Thomas with my family for vacation.
I will not be either.
Oh, we're in
July 21 should,
And I will be.
21st.
So maybe we need to
Should move that one.
reschedule. Yeah, it sounds like we just discovered a problem. We'd have gotten there, but it
Yeah.
might not have been for another week.
And the project sheets are on within that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of do your.
but the following, the 28th work for anybody.
I was just gonna slowly scroll, honestly, because some of these are really.
Back on that day either.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I was finding too. I just want a little more time, but.
The ideas are
Up to you.
great and really out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have some options for July and I just want to go over those with you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like it's not fair to just walk away, since we just discovered that. And we do have our future agendas as the next section, unless there's
Yeah,
other
I
questions
really
on
like
that.
that
Let's see.
I
addition.
had a couple of
too.
questions, if that's all right. I can hold them to next time if we're out of time, but I did have a couple broader questions that I was kind of
we
curious.
can talk about that. And then when we get to the
Yeah.
calendar item.
Yeah, we can pull it up and I'm just.
It's good that this
There,
is
yeah.
during the meeting.
Yes.
Some of these are probably pretty simple. Will the Harvard Road reconstruction of, sorry. Will Harvard Road have multimodal components to it? Is it just kind of a bog standard street replacement in kind?
Currently, it is planned just for the pavement issue. But we do like to do a corridor approach, so we'll be looking at that whole area to see what other things we could do. Now, we do have to make sure there's funding sources available. So if we see a stormwater issue and we want to bring in stormwater funds, or a water line issue, we bring in water line funds. So if there was something multimodal related, we would have to identify, we typically look at the 5-year bike head
Right.
plan, and then we also look at the bike plan, like, do we need sharrows in this area? Is it lanes, bike lanes? So we do look at that when we do our street maintenance projects.
Okay. About what's the city's total contribution to the K-10 project? Because I thought it was maybe just cost share, but that would be a big cost share. It's like millions a year, it looks like.
On the K-10
K-10 expansion.
SLT,
So most that's KDOT, right?
so we don't have that in the so our SLT project, that K-10 project, we had outlined 5.6 million in the previous CIP. That's the one that's coming off the top of my head. I could pull it up here. It was about that much for what was identified. Originally, it was like 8.3 or 8.4 million, but there were some trade-offs with the county. So the city is there's an agreement with the county for the city to take on a portion like a 31st Street. We're going to annex and take on the maintenance of that. We're funding a few other projects of theirs. And in return, they're doing that Wakarusa Drive expansion
Oh,
that the city are not doing.
right, okay.
So that was all part of the match for this West Leg SLT project. There were certain things, a portion of the city and the county would fund. And so I would still say our investment is 8.3, 8.4 million. We're just paying for some of the county stuff, as well as 5.5 million of our CIP capital as of right now dollars.
Okay, I would, if at all possible, I'd really like to see a breakdown of what happened, because I think we talked about the initial stages of negotiating what was going to be in and who's going to pay for it. And then there was a couple of months of struggling to meet quorum that we didn't meet. And I feel like that's probably when this happened. And now it's actually under construction. I'm kind of curious to see just what happened,
And Dave Cronin had an agenda item that summarized everything. Sometime last spring, I think it went. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but I
Is
could
that
look.
something we could have just attached as an FYI to? the
I could just look it
agenda?
up if
Good.
you know what the meeting, or I'll just go back through previous ones if that was, I guess, time.
Okay.
We can definitely pull that up and find it, but it has not changed since that agenda item, the contributions.
Okay.
We did make just this spring our payments to KDOT that the city had to pay as our contribution for their Westlake SLT project. So those have gone through and cleared to my knowledge.
That is helpful. Hopefully it wasn't presented to me and I totally forgot it. That's hopefully not. Okay, just in general, with bond funded projects, is the philosophy that the completed projects will boost revenue enough to cover their debt service, or it's just like we have to do, it just is what it is? Like, are they seen as investments, right? Like investments in continuing to maintain this asset, the hope that, whatever sales tax or property tax revenue that is, either maintained or increased from them is enough to eventually cover the cost of them, or does that kind of math not necessarily happen on an explicit basis for projects? I don't know if I can necessarily explain, like say for example, you're gonna spend $5 million to build a new road to the west of K-10. It seems like it would make sense to see, like, does the property tax and sales tax over the lifetime of that asset pay enough to cover the cost that we spent on that, because it only services them? Does that kind of calculation go into play when, I guess, deciding what gets on the list?
Yes, and I would say that's where street extensions, that's where you have the benefit district instead of the city funding it. Paying for that, it does fall back on those property owners that are benefiting from it. So the city may take on that cost initially, and then they either pay the bill when they get it upon completion of the project, or it's assessed on their taxes for 10 years. However, that benefit district, set up all the details. I'm not an expert on benefit districts. I've just gone through a little bit of Queens Road.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to learn more in the next couple of years. But even on like the revenue bond side, I'm thinking of the Wakarusa wastewater treatment plant. When we look at bonding that, brand new treatment plant when it went in, right? It was constructed from 2015, went into operation March of 2018. The thought is, if you used existing funds on hand, you're using funds that were collected, right? And not those that are actually using this over the next 50 years. But if you debt fund it, then what's paying for it are those users that are actually using that asset. If that makes sense. So, so we do look at that on some of like new facilities that are geo debt bonded. It's kind of the same thing. It's the residents that are living and paying taxes and living and working in Lawrence in the future are going to be utilizing that rec center, that, you know, swimming pool, the fire station.
Right. So I think for more generically regional capital projects, that makes a lot of sense. But for something like a road expansion to a place that is going to be kind of a dead end suburb that is probably not going to be expanded upon, at least within the life cycle project based on how we're growing currently. I mean, it makes sense for the residents to at least partly pay for the capital expense, but that's only a small portion of the life cycle cost, which at this point is infinite. We don't know how long Lawrence is gonna last, right? Like it will have to be replaced and maintained and everything. And that cost ends up being covered by the general fund, right?
From the property taxes of the people, in theory, along that road.
And the property taxes of everybody else.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Right.
Who also have a road in front of
Who also have a road in front of us. So
unless you're on a private street.
Exactly.
yes.
right. It just, so it kind of gets to another question I had, and that is that, I mean, you guys are probably familiar with Strong Towns at this point, and
I
there's.
knew that's where you were headed.
I mean, there's this whole argument of like the cost per linear foot of infrastructure is way too much for the cost per acre that we're bringing in property tax revenue. So like it, at some point, like the math just doesn't work very well, which is why we kind of find ourselves in the situation that we're in, right? Which is like, there is not enough money to pay for all this stuff. Does MSO ever find itself getting involved in discussions of like development and saying like, we have tons of infrastructure that could be used already or made better use of by developing like in the city or just being denser versus continuing to expand? Because like that directly involves that. I mean, I would imagine
Just
just,
say yes, and because the
Yeah.
challenge is okay, yeah, maybe that works from a street perspective, but it may not work from a water or wastewater or stormwater perspective. So it depends on sort of how dense, where in our systems that it sits, and then, you know, a whole another set of questions on that. So
Or a particular industry or business might say, well, yes, that all has the infrastructure, but it doesn't provide the market area I'm looking for in this particular spot, you know?
yeah, so you have the public side and then the private.
And really, we just take direction from the commission. If the commission says we're moving in that direction, I mean, we have the long-term plans in place that go through public process and the commission gives us the direction. They're ultimately the ones that, you know, approve if there's going to be an annexation and we grow in a certain area. We just lay out the facts.
yeah.
And Strong Towns is good up to a point, but it does miss things. So it has its merits, but then there's certain things that just doesn't take into account for. So,
I'm interested to hear more about this because I only hear the one side, of course. So,
yeah, well, of course, it's an argument that's easy to understand. So
sure.
it's kind of like the fire truck argument. There's two sides to all these things.
It's more complicated, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it. Okay. Yep. Thanks, everybody. I'm good. Sorry. Hogging the floor.
No, you're good. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Any other questions on projects or anything?
Okay.
I was just gonna pull this up with us.
Yeah, so the next things we have on here.
We have.
We had talked earlier about a retreat and I brought that up to Melissa. I don't know that, you know, we're almost more than halfway through the first year. I don't know if we still want to do a retreat, if that matters.
So we want to look to do it in the fall
Yeah,
at work.
I think this summer you know, we'll have lower attendance, obviously, so I
Yeah.
think the fall.
Summer's booked.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we want to revisit in the fall or bring back some options,
What do you
maybe in
think?
the August meeting?
Yeah, what do you guys
Any
think?
other options for dates?
Yeah,
Topics or.
yeah, topics, yeah. And we can meet in between then and there, like, don't try to have something ready for July, but give us a little bit of time to get together.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
does it sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
I do think it would be helpful to spend some time thinking about what we can help you all with.
Mhm.
our scope is so broad.
Yeah,
that
we agree with that.
It feels like we could spend the whole time learning without providing any value back to you. And so want to make sure that we're useful and you're not just having to prepare information for us endlessly without us giving something back.
And I'm not remembering, where do we land with the whole, like, does the whole thing have to be like televised?
It
Probably.
it
How
does
does that
not,
work?
the Zoom recording allows for someone to watch it later.
Okay,
If they want to participate, they can come or come in by
To the
Zoom
retreat, okay.
or Zoom in. Okay, so it's no different than the commission.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I understand, retreats don't, and we'll need to double check that. It's like if you announce you're on a retreat in your public agenda.
And you say where it's gonna.
Where it's gonna be, and you
That's
made
it.
the notice.
Okay.
Person.
I don't think there's retreat you'd have a line Zoom, it'd just be if someone wanted to come
Right.
observe.
We did that with the
observe.
airport advisory board. We had a kind of a one-off meeting that was just a kind of planning meeting, and that was not televised, but people could come and attend. And we had a few people who participated because they have a, active, obviously, interest by the folks out there, but yeah.
Okay.
Anytime we have quorum, we have to, have it noticed.
Right, that's why I was wondering what that looked like for a retreat.
Governing body does it too. So if someone wants to come sit from the press or an interested resident, they can do that. Sometimes we see people at those and other times you don't. It just
Yeah.
depends. You have to plan for both, so. Okay, got that. And then,
Calendar.
yeah. So tentatively right now, what I have slated for topics, pretty sure well, not on July 21st, but I think we need a different date because all three of us are, your team is not going to be here, which is a wee bit of a problem. Trevor, you want to just kind of briefly explain what you're coming back with there?
Yeah, so the land disturbance permit is now live on the electronic permitting and licensing software.
Yes.
So it's a new city permit that was in the new land development code for a variety of earthwork activities. So we kind of wanted to brief you on the launch of that, what that permit looks like.
And why?
It's driven by construction, stormwater and erosion sediment control. And that I envision to be just kind of a fairly brief FYI that might be interesting. Some of that is also, it gives us an opportunity to publicly discuss the permit with you guys. Because it's being new, the more opportunities we have to kind of talk about it a little bit is helpful as well. The second portion is a totally different topic, is it's the stormwater equivalency residential units. That's a project we've been working on alongside our stormwater rates. And so we have basically modernized a little bit of that approach. And we want to kind of roll that out and show you guys what that looks like.
I feel like I saw that in a city commission agenda not that long ago. Is it just brought up every time that utility rates are talked about?
Yeah, so stormwater rates have traditionally been approved every year.
Mhm.
So I feel like we're there early December. So it
This last
doesn't,
year.
yes, so during that presentation, we've talked about updating the ERUs.
I do remember reading through them and thinking this is an interesting way to calculate stuff. So I have a feeling that's probably what
Yeah,
conversation will be about then.
yeah, and if you read and it's not just, and what that basically equates to is the modernization of the city code, the ordinances that go with that. Because if you read it now, there's some calculations in there that are a little bit very dated. However, that July date doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, I guess the options that I would present out to you and my team, because we're doing this live and in person at the moment, would either be the 14th, and that may be too soon, or the 28th, which that's both sticking on the Mondays, just based on feedback. I can't make the 28th because my flight doesn't get in until about midnight that night. But the 14th I would be able to be at, but
It's the second Monday of the month. Do you have conflict? Or not in July?
second Monday of the month in July should be.
I didn't know if you had a board meeting.
I may have my board meeting. I do. Okay, then then I've got Harvester. So you're gonna miss me in July. I think that's what I'm trying to tell you. So
I
work it out with these two.
14th or the 28th works.
Can I?
Okay.
Doesn't make a
Do the
difference.
14th in person and the 28th on Zoom.
Okay, and we'll need a quorum, so if all of you here can do one date over the other, I think that's where we'll get gun towards.
I can do it just fine.
I can do it.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so what works better for you?
For you, because those are your topics.
Yeah.
I could do the 14th. My only concern with the 14th, whether the ERU information will be available, but
Well, and it has to go out ahead of that,
yeah.
so you can't do the 28th because you're off. Possibly. Are you on vacation?
No.
No.
I'm here at 20. Well, no, let's say possibly. Yes, you're right.
I thought so.
Let's do the 14th.
Well, the reason is like they have to submit stuff in advance and sometimes they tell me things and some of that sticks occasionally.
Without looking.
Thinking 14th.
14th, we're looking at the 14th, same time, should be able to get this room. That's the assumption. So just assume it's gonna be here. So we'll work on that and getting that set up. Sound good?
How do other committees like this handle attendance? Like, are they asking members to RSVP in advance so that, I'm just worried that we'll.
I wish I
get
could,
here and
this
it'll
is
be
my
like-
thing about comas. I wish I could just send out the email and be like,
Well, and the thing is I guess I'll message everybody out, but I have an expectation if you're not gonna be here
yeah.
No.
to let us know or let
Yeah.
the chair know.
I mean,
But that again,
with anything.
yeah, I mean,
Life.
like Nick had communicated to Hillary
Yeah.
that he was running
Right,
late,
yeah.
so we knew to wait.
Yeah.
But
I don't have that worry for the people in this room.
Right, yeah,
There's a group of people.
totally.
yeah.
Also.
And Hillary and I have been working on the one individual who's not attended at all. I've made the clerk aware of that. The clerk's working through things on that end and,
Okay.
Thank you for that.
yeah, and then we do have some slots that are gonna come up. And so if you are interested, I believe Hillary's already said
Okay.
if you're one of the 1 year people that you've gotten something back into the clerk. So that way we can get you re-upped if you're interested. So
Mm.
sound good?
Mhm.
So that will occur in September. That'll be the reset date, which is not in alignment with how the resolution reads.
Yeah.
Whatever, it's been an interesting one going
Okay.
through. It's based on a fiscal year, which our fiscal year is 1/1, just like a calendar year, and your appointments are in September. So
Okay.
we did not write that one because we would have caught that. So, hello, fun. Okay, so we'll work on the 14th, and then the July or the August meeting, I know it's not up there anymore, but
Mhm.
just to kind of give you an idea of what I was looking at is our MSO campus. We'd like to do an update on that. And if we have the possibility of maybe meeting out at the site, whether it's with that meeting or separately, we'll work with our GM that's on there, Callan Gordon. And if we have to try to do like what we did with Trevor tour, we'll do that too. But kind of let you kind of understand from our project manager standpoint, which is Andy, sort of what he's watching for, how he's doing it, what the engagement looks like on our end for the taxpayers and the community. And then the other part of that, and I don't know that I can do both at once, but is also talk about how we do utility rates. Because that's something I think that you all may, as we go through this next year, not this year, but this next year, we may want some input from you sooner on about what we're doing, just to kind of help gauge where the community is. Because, you know, right now we're doing it with our best intentions. I guess is the best way to put that. And we do have very competent outside consultants helping us, and we're applying all those things that we talked through in this, but I think it would be kind of good for you to see that just kind of the models and how we're looking at that. It won't be like sitting in here like building rate models with you, but rather just showing you sort of what are the inputs that we take? How do we look at these things? Why do we do what we do? And what are the things that Trevor can control on costs, maybe a little easier than things that he can't. And I think that will also kind of help you, since you've been out and looked at some of the plans now, to kind of go, oh yeah, I see what you're talking about now. That's how this comes into the model. So again, you guys become mini advocates for us,
Right.
and also feedback for us if we're missing something. So it's kind of how I see that. So I thought that would be a good one. And then the September one, if if we have to shove one thing or another, that's probably what we'll do there. And then we want to talk to you about our KPIs. Melinda did talk about our PCI, our pavement condition index at 70. We want to go through those. We would have loved to have done that sooner, to be honest with you. Problem is we've been working through with the city manager's office in a really interesting and deliberative process on which ones we're focusing on, because we had scroll of them, a long list. And so those have been done, but we want to see that up and live and not have you looking at like, oh, TBD.
Yeah.
So that's why I shoved that out into September. But that'll inform us as we move into the next budget cycle, so it'll be kind of
It's
interesting.
timely with the retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is I
Yeah.
think the retreat discussion.
Those would go well together.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and then just kind of see where maybe why we ended up focusing on one thing, because Melinda and I shot out one direction, the city manager came out another, and we ended up here. So,
Yeah.
but then we can talk about what it, from a resident's perspective, because that's important to me to understand where you guys are at and what we're maybe missing. So, sound good?
Sounds
Great.
Okay, so that's where I'm at.
Sounds good.
Right,
Exciting couple of months.
Yeah.
I like where it's going.
TBD.
Okay, next thing is adjournment. Everyone, do I hear an adjournment? Do I have to motion? Yeah.
The meeting, I don't know if we
And then
did.
you're done.
Doing.
I second. All right.
Need a second. Motion to adjourn and just exit under Robert's rules. Since your Robert's rule guy isn't here.